Moving right along on the show for Kansas Sports Chatter as we bring in our next guests, and it is story time with KSHSAA Covered as we bring in one of the staff writers, Scott Paske. Hey, Scott, appreciate you coming on. How was the Easter break for you?
It was good, beautiful day to hide Easter eggs, I guess, and then to eat a little too much, and then try to walk it off. So always good when the weather starts turning like this. I enjoyed it.
Now, is your family? Are you guys invested? I keep seeing like these trending videos of like the people like dressing up in like giant costumes and going out for Easter egg hunts. Is that the past family?
We're pretty laid back on Easter. It's we enjoy the Easter message every year. Then just got grown up kids, so it's all no grandkids yet or anything like that. So we're still taking it pretty easy at this point.
All right, so this time of the year, like we've been moving on into the spring sports, but it's also like a really fun time to kind of recap of some of the stuff that we saw in the winter sports. And obviously, you know, the state basketball tournaments is a high-profile event, so all the classifications. Like before we get into like the recent state championship, like you've covered so many like great. I mean, as a sports writer, like you've covered so many big-time events throughout your career. But even at the high school stage, like that state tournament, man, that's just a special feel. Like whether it's the quarterfinals, the semifinals, then obviously the championship game. There's just been so many special moments over the years.
No, March is my favorite month, and a big reason why is the state high school tournaments. You know, I'm an old coach's kid, and so I kind of grew up in that environment, and went to a few state tournaments with my dad when I was really young, and then got into sports writing and just really I think the first one I covered was in 1989, and kind of can remember Nickerson's Boys with John Hodges, who's now the women's coach at HCC in Hutchinson, and it just seems like every year there's memories that build. You know, happened to see a freshman named Jackie Stiles score 53 points up at Hayes back in 1994. That to me is my favorite moment that I've ever seen in the state high school tournament. But to me, we're all NCAA tournament junkies. We love the tournament, and a lot of it has to do with that one shining moment video that comes at the end of each tournament. And I think to me, the high school state tournaments in Kansas are very much like that without that video at the end. I mean, because if you immerse yourself in the state tournament and watch it over the 4 days each year or 5 days this year as it was, you're going to see something. Like you said, it could happen in the first quarterfinal game on Tuesday, or it would be could be the championship on Saturday. Something's going to happen that might leave an indelible mark, and I think and sometimes those tournaments marry those moments. You get Keaton Wagler at Shawnee Mission Northwest, who won 2 state titles the last couple of years, played in the Final Four this year for Illinois. So that's when it's really fun, is when Kansas produces enough type of talent that they can transcend the high school and move up to college and make something big happen there as well.
We're going to have, I like that you brought up Jackie Stiles. We're going to have Jeff Bullock here on the show, and with the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame, he's going to talk about Jackie Stiles a little bit. But what do you remember about that 53-point game? Like, what stood out to you about that game?
Well, to me, I was covering the 1A state tournament for the Hutchinson News back then when I was a sports writer for them. Actually, Keaton Wagler's dad, Logan, played for Hutch High back then too. So another example of how old I am. But that 1A tournament up in Hayes, Clint Kinnaman had sent out his preseason questionnaire that year, and he had mentioned this freshman named Jackie Stiles and said average 30 a game in junior high and probably is going to be one to watch. And I thought that was like maybe the most understated preseason questionnaire statement I'd ever read. But finally got my first look at her at the state tournament, and I just remember she really, she started strong, and you could just tell at that level she was so outstandingly talented. But really, what will always stand out to me is I think in that third quarter of that game, she ends up with 53 points, but she scored 25 in that third quarter, and I mean, these were not easy shots necessarily. I mean, these were shots that weren't touching anything but net. I mean, it was just one of those jaw-dropping performances, and so everything that she did throughout her high school career, and then went on and had that outstanding career at Southwest Missouri State, and eventually into the WNBA. It was so fun to just see the kind of the seeds of all that, and kind of that first look at boy, she's a superstar. And I know a lot of people will say Lynette Woodard is, older people will say Lynette Woodard is maybe the best player they've ever seen. I didn't get to see Lynette until she played for the Globetrotters. But Jackie Stiles to me was just dynamite, and you knew she was going to be great. And it was so great to get to a chance to experience that.
So you've seen some great performances. So I'll ask you, I won't ask you to where this ranks as far as a number, but where does the Kellen Groover shot for Bonner Springs rank up there for you?
Yeah, it's I covered the Class 5A and 6A tournaments this year in Wichita, and that was one of those moments. The thing is, there's always a big shot in a close game, and that ends up being a 3-point game. That shot gave Bonner Springs the lead, and they had been down 11, and they had been kind of clawing and fighting to get back in it. There was still 1:40 left in the game. So at that point, you're still thinking, okay, a lot's going to happen here down the stretch. But when he took the shot, I was kind of sitting at the opposite end with my camera on the other baseline. I was kind of directly behind him. And it was just one of those, when he let it go, you knew, that shot's going in. And what it did is it gave Bonner Springs the lead, and it really put them in position. So many times you'll see teams make a comeback. They'll be down 20 and get it to 5, or 15, they'll get it to 3, or maybe 10, they'll get it tied and they'll have the ball and they won't score a couple times. That, to me, that shot, which it was no doubt when he let it go. I know Kellen's talked about it a lot, and he said that shot was made in his practice sessions in the gym, and it absolutely was. It was such a confident shot. It was one of those moments that, kind of thinking about it as it was unfolding throughout the rest of the evening, I just thought, Kellen Groover will never have to buy another cheeseburger in Bonner Springs, Kansas again. I mean, that was a moment. That was a signature moment. The backdrop that I witnessed was the student section right behind him as it splashed through, and those students were going crazy, and the townspeople were going crazy, and it was a fun moment. A great moment for Bonner Springs and their community against a really great, Cape and Mount Carmel's been the gold standard in 5A basketball the last couple of years. And so that was all that stuff really just added up to one of those moments that you'll never forget.
And you're telling me you remember the 1984 from
Bonner
Springs?
I lived in Southeast Kansas. My dad coached down there at Eureka at the time, and Bonner Springs had qualified for the 5A tournament in Emporia. That year in 1984, and another guy played for McPherson that year named Steve Henson, who went on to great things at K-State. But so it was one of those years where you saw. I'm just one of those junkies that remembers who you saw when. That's how I mark time. And Bonner Springs had a player named Hugh Suffren who went on and played football and a little basketball at Iowa State. He was kind of the star of that team, and saw their quarterfinal game. They ended up winning a real close championship game, but. So I'm old enough to be able to bridge the gap for Bonner Springs and say that I saw both teams that won state championships. But and that's why I know it was just a cool moment for those communities that go 40 years without a state title. I mean, there's a lot of schools that are there every year and they get it done every 2 or 3 years. But for Bonner Springs, that was a generational victory, and really fun to see. Not just Kellen, who had the signature moment for that championship, but that whole team, because that was a group that was really embraced in Bonner Springs.
Impressive stuff. You can check out the work at KSHSAACovered.com. Hey, Scott, appreciate the time.
Enjoyed it. Thanks a lot, Cole.
That's Scott Paske, one of the staff writers for KSHSAA Covered. We'll have more of the show right after this.